Welcome to the Human Experience Podcast, the only podcast designed to fuse your left and right brain hemispheres and feed it the most entertaining and mentally engaging topics on the planet. As we approach our ascent, please make sure your frontal, temporal and occipital lobes are in their full upright position. As you take your seat of consciousness, relax your senses and allow us to take you on a journey. We are the Intimate Strangers. Thank you for listening.
The fabric of the scene and really changed after that, and it got a lot crazier, a lot more kind of rock and roll. And I encourage people, if they wake up and they land in that cubicle every day and they feel like, oh my God, this sucks, what am I doing here? Get out. It'll work itself out. Get out.
What's up, guys? You are listening to The Human Experience. Our episode today is with Mr. Zach Leary. Zach is into some really interesting topics concerning futurism, consciousness, spirituality, mysticism, psychedelics. We get into all of those things. We talk about his relationship with his dad. This is a great episode and it flew by. And whenever that happens, it's usually a good episode. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Thank you so much for listening. The Human Experience is in session. My guest for today is Mr. Zach Leary. Zach, my good sir, welcome to HXP.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I'm familiar with your background, but many of our listeners might not be. If you could just give us a short biography of, who you are, what you do, please.
Sometimes when that question's asked, and being sort of the pathologically anti-authoritarian spiritualist that I am, I'm just a soul trying to find some grace. I don't really know what it is I do. I'm just trying to get through another moment, trying to find grace and wisdom as I can. I spent about 15 years working in pretty high levels within the marketing and advertising industry. I'm helping brands and various bands as well and entities kind of develop their digital presence and their technology strategy. Mm-hmm. And, and I had not a great time doing that, but an okay time doing that. And I reached somewhat senior levels. Then I kind of got to this point to where I just was, I hit my head on the wall and kind of came up with just your perfect existential spiritual crisis and realized, what am I doing? How can I spend my all of my waking hours going to offices and being kind of lost in office culture and working on so-called passions and goals that are really other people's, And that's not to say, that people who do that are lost. I mean, there are many great people who do great things like that. Just was not for me.
Yeah.
It turned out, yeah. So I kind of did an about face, but then I kind of just turned all of my interest and focus into really doing the things that I'm most passionate about, and that's focusing on a very human application of spiritual principles, as well as talking about the sort of the evolution of mankind as defined through technology, and where technology is driving us both on a psycho-spiritual level and as well as a sociological level. Because it is really, I think, within the last 100 years, the advent of technology. I mean, from the Industrial Revolution on, I just don't mean like Facebook and phones, but technology is really shaping our culture into either the destruction or the savior. So I'm just kind of interested in all of those things. And so, yeah, I podcast and I write and talk and teach and things like that.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I liked what you said about the 9-to-5 grind. And I think a lot of us get caught up in that sort of cubicle matrix world. And It's hard to break out when you're in the midst of that world. So, I mean,
it is. And I want to say too, so sorry to interrupt, but I do want to say too that it's really important. Like, sometimes if I go on a preamble like this, it does sound like high and mighty. And I don't mean it to be that way. People who do have to go to a cubicle today because they have to pay their rent and feed their family, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. I just think it's about listening to your own heart and being true, to thine self, what's working for you. Many people are happy being creative directors at advertising agencies and do great work. If that's your dharma, that's yours. It just wasn't mine.
Right.
And I encourage people, if they wake up and they land in that cubicle every day and they feel like, oh my God, this sucks. What am I doing here? Get out. It'll work itself out. Get out.
Yeah, that's the biggest step I think you can take for your own personal evolution. So when you mentioned spirituality and there's a mixture of technology, are you a transhumanist? Do you believe in this futuristic sort of dumping consciousness into, a body, something like that? Anything like that?
Yeah, I do consider myself to be a transhumanist in the sense that I'll caveat that by saying I don't know if consciousness can be distilled to a version that can be written into some firmware. I don't know if that's ever going to be possible, because I believe that consciousness in and of itself is a disembodied phenomenon that exists outside of ourselves. And the human being's interaction with consciousness is just our perception. Consciousness will continue to exist without us. So I don't know if that's possible, but yes, I do believe in the mutation of mankind into fusing with technology.
Do you think that this is something that we'll see within our lifetime?
Well, we're starting to see it. I mean, we're starting to see it on smaller levels. There are nanotech improvements that are starting to happen. It's very, very possible that within our lifetimes, we'll be able to see through nanotechnology fused with corrective surgery, like the repairing of quadriplegics, things like that. This is certainly an ethical thing, and for better or for worse, but, we can now map the human genome and look at certain traits to see where perhaps one might want to improve and how to, whether it's cognitively improve or health-wise. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to see those things. I know this, it freaks a lot of people out, especially people who are, into sort of the green, organic, back to the earth movement. But I don't think it should freak us out. So yeah, I mean, we're starting to see it. And I think within the next 50 years, we're really going to see some things that 20 years ago would have been science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing the progress that we're making in it. I think you touch on this in your work, but I'm not sure if humanity is ready for the cultural advancements that technology is making. It's happening so fast that it's almost overwhelming how quickly technology is advancing in parallel to our own understanding of it. I mean, do you agree?
I absolutely agree. I mean, there's no question. How could I not? I just think at any time if somebody panics and kind of gets freaked out at that relationship, the most important thing to do is to step back and realize the human condition as we know it now, and you look around at our species. Like, I think it's presumptuous to say that this is the final stop in the human evolutionary matrix. I don't believe that. I think this is human being 1.0. I mean, I just don't believe that this is the end of the human evolutionary ladder. I think there could be a human being 2.0. And what does that human being 2.0 look like? I really have no idea. But what if it is a synthesis of silicon-infused enhancements? What if that is God's will?
So there is an aspect of you believing in God as well as being a futurist and believing in technology. Let's rewind a little bit. You adapted, was it the Krishna consciousness movement that you bounced into, or how did that come about with the spiritual practice that you use?
Yeah, I mean, the Krishna conscious movement played a part in it for sure. I mean, it was a combination of that and my association with Ram Dass. Ram Dass being very close with my father and growing up with him and him being around a lot. So when I was a teenager, I got exposed to his work and to the Krishna consciousness movement for sure. And then, it took me a while to sort of develop any sort of spiritual practice because I honestly just wasn't that disciplined when I was young. So I just was bouncing around, you know what I mean? But it was still in my soul and imprinted somewhere in there. And then later on, I kind of got closer to Ram Dass again and met him in a different way. I'm not sure how that happened, how those sort of mystical experiences transpire, but they did. And I just saw him in a different light. And I'm part of that community in that satsang now, but the Krishna consciousness movement definitely as well plays a part. I'm not, uninitiated Hare Krishna. I would not say that, but I have great reverence for what Krishna consciousness is, and the overall sort of, as Ram Dass used to love to say when he met Neem Karoli Baba in 1967, he gave me a new map of consciousness. And so for the way Vedanta and the Hindu blueprint looks at consciousness and energy structures and how that kind of manifests into spirituality, it works for me.
Yeah, let's dive into that.
Yeah.
So in a daily practice, is it kirtan? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I mean, my daily practice consists of a little bit of meditation, just kind of traditional Vipassana meditation, anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And then kirtan. Yeah, I sing a specific chant every day. And then if time permits, I sing more. And then if time permits even more, I'll do some japa, which is repetition of mantras on a mala, on beads.
Right.
Yeah, but at the bare minimum, I'll do meditation and sing some prayers.
Yeah, I was exposed to the Krishna consciousness movement as well. I was working at this startup incubator, and they would serve lunch every day nearby. So I would just go there. I would donate like $5 and eat this really healthy Indian food, which was delicious. And I slowly started to pick up the teachings of it. I can't say that I stuck with it, but there was something about it that resonated for me as true. You know how you just kind of feel something as, okay, this is resonating, this fits something, this works. Maybe your conscious mind doesn't really completely comprehend what that connection is. You understand?
Yeah, and you summed it up perfectly. The conscious mind does not understand what the subconscious mind, its connection is.
Tell me about these beads. Is it repetition of certain specific sounds that resonates your body, or how does that work?
Well, it is said that the utterance of the names of God are the same as God itself. So if you are chanting the various names of God, whatever resonate with you the most, and this means mantra, if you are uttering those names, that means you are calling in the divine itself in physical form. You are calling it into your space. They are one of the same. So the repetition of these names, the ISKCON, the Hare Krishna movement, is a really good example to look at this, because they're very dedicated to their japa. I mean, that's their core practice, is the repetition of the Hare Krishna mantra on these beads. And by, reciting it over and over and over again, there's a great quote by a wonderful teacher named Radhanath Swami that says, mantra or kirtan cleanses the dust off the mirror of one's own heart. So the divine lives within your heart always. It's always within, and every tradition will tell you that, that it's within. But through the process of being alive, suffering, greed, desires, sense pleasures, ego, whatever it is, your heart gets dusty, and it just clouds up your divinity. And we just become, the human condition can become very exacerbated on the egoic side. So the chanting of these names, it just slowly just wipes off some of the dust and slowly gets you back to who you truly are. And that is a manifestation of divinity. A lot of people who are kind of getting into spirituality and into practices, they can sort of get hung up on the external thing. Well, if God is within, then why do you have these, these statues, these murtis of gods all over the place? Why are you looking at pictures of gurus? That's external, isn't it? And it is, but the reason for them, it's because they are reminders. Unless you are truly a realized being, I'm not a truly realized being. I don't think that's going to happen to me this time. It's not looking that way. But unless you're a truly realized being, the human condition keeps coming back. It just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. So it just, we need these reminders to go deeper.
Yeah, and the grand illusion, the Maya, which is, it's so immersive, and we all get trapped in that. We all get trapped in this sort of cycle of suffering, and I think that internal pain, that internal struggle, tends to cause us to look for external solutions, as in drugs, alcohol, to sort of numb that pain, to sort of just numb ourselves away. And one of the reasons that I personally connected with the Krishna consciousness movement was just because, you know, they talked about this. They mentioned, and a lot of the things that some of the people that were living in the Krishna consciousness temple were telling me, it was something like, I was going out drinking, partying with my friends, and the next day, I felt like shit, and I was hungover, and it was so temporary. It was so plastic. You know, it was really getting to me when I encountered these people who were sort of offering this solution to, okay, look inside and use this japa, use these beads to kind of resonate this sound. You know, I was interested. It was like a magnet. I was just pulled towards it.
You're so right. And they have a very concise and clean perspective, distilling what is Maya and what is not, and why sense pleasures. You know, in the middle of all of this too, I obviously, I still have reverence for the psychedelic movement and things like that. And, sense pleasures in and of themselves aren't necessarily bad things, but it is so easy to get carried away with them and to lose yourself in them as sources of endless pleasure, because at the end of the day, it will never be enough. In some ways, the quality of addiction is pervasive throughout the entire human existence. We are just, it's never enough, it's never enough, it's never enough. Whether that's drugs, sex, alcohol, money, shopping, food, bombs, power, even how our country measures its health. It measures it on what's called the GDP, which is the assumption of consumption, of greed, of expansion. It's not a metric of restraint. It's a metric of growth. Gotta have more, gotta have more, gotta have more. That's how we're healthy. GDP's gotta go up. That's an insane way to think.
Yeah.
And so, the Krishna consciousness movement it shatters all of that, and just goes into the contentness and the purity of this moment, and everything that you have, everything that you need it's all right here.
Yeah. I feel like it's like when the veil is over your eyes and you're just, you turn your TV on and you're just kind of zombied out. It's really difficult to see past that illusion because of how pervasive it is. Zach, I'd really like to talk to you about your relationship with your dad. Those are big shoes to fill. That's a long shadow to kind of stand under. How old were you when he died?
I was 22.
You were around him a lot.
I was, yeah.
What was the lifestyle like back then when you were interacting with him and you saw him kind of do these speeches and give these talks? I mean, how did you feel?
Well, it certainly changed a lot over the course of time, I have to say. A large part of that due to him divorcing my mother, and my mother, taking off and moving to South America. And then I stayed in Los Angeles with him, and, the fabric of the scene and really changed after that. And it got a lot crazier, a lot more kind of, rock and roll, I guess, to put it subtly. But growing up, it took me a long time to understand what it is he did. But when you're a kid, you can't get your head around that stuff. I didn't know. I knew he was famous, and I knew he wrote, and I knew he would go on these college lecture tours. But I didn't understand like the depth of them, and I didn't understand what, the context of them was, or the content. Now and then he'd get kind of hired for like a B movie part, which was kind of funny. And he took me to the set one day, and he was just acting in this role. And I was standing on set. I was a kid. I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And I was standing there just as on the movie set, next to lighting guys and grips and all of those things. And some grip who's standing next to me goes, "I can't believe they're letting that awful, awful man be in this movie."
Wow.
And he didn't know my connection, obviously, or I don't think he would have said it. I was like, oh my God, why would anybody say that about my dad? Like, what did he do?
Yeah.
And I asked him on the ride home, and I remember that, but still that answer was hard for me to get hold of. But, and then he sort of mentioned that, well, the 1960s and psychedelics and LSD were very polarizing. It was an amazing time of discovery and expansion, individuality, and a loosening of the cultural restrictions that had previously governed this country. But it was also polarizing. There were a lot of people feeling different things, and he pissed a lot of people off. So I was just starting to learn about him then. But as I sort of got older, as I became a teenager and I was a deadhead, it was a huge part of my youth. I really got into his work, and he not only was a father, but a teacher. I mean, some of his books had a profound influence on me growing up.
I can feel there's some pain in your voice there when we talk about him. Does it bother you when people bring him up to you at all?
No, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm always happy to talk about it. I love him and I miss him. I have great reverence for him. I just, there's just sort of, I guess, a natural limit on how much I can answer,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Because I am my own person, and I've spent a lot of years and had to go through a lot of pain, sadly, to discover who I truly am. And a lot of that was sort of shedding. I can't be him. I mean, he was. I can't be that. I can't try to even follow to do that. So I've just had to create who I am and be happy with that. But yeah, I have great reverence, but there's just only so much I can answer. It's not like I have any sort of secret code or any sort of secret perception into the workings of Timothy Leary's mind. I just have my experience.
That's a completely fair point, and I would never put you in that position. Like, give me all the secrets. I'm only an observer, and I'm not in that position at all. But I feel like that would be a very difficult position to carry, to follow through. And so one of the reasons that we brought you onto the show is that we're requested by many of our listeners to have you on. But one thing that you did carry on of your father's work was just your interest in psychedelics. And is there a psychedelic that you kind of lean towards? Ayahuasca, LSD, any of those?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I think I would say, like, long term, in the sense of it really altered who I am more than any other psychedelic, it's been LSD. It's really changed the fabric of my being, and gave me the tools to pierce the veil in the way that was most profound for me, for sure. But today, it's pretty rare that I'd want to do an acid trip, mainly because it's so long, and my fragile little eggshell mind just can't take it as much as well anymore. So I find DMT to be a very, very useful tool because it's short. And I've surveyed the landscape of psychedelics, so many times now, you know what I mean? That I don't need to constantly go back into long, heroic journeys over and over again. I mean, now and then, sure, it's great, it's valuable, but I love the kind of the quick in and out profundity that DMT gives.
And it's important to regard these compounds as just tools. These are not party compounds. These are not things that you use to get effed up with your friends and have a good time. That's just, That's not the way that I see them at all. And, I like to put that disclaimer on it, at least that. I know that you struggled and battled with addiction yourself. What was something for you that was the breaking point where you said to yourself, okay, I have to change this. I have to shift this?
Jail.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I was a low bottom addict. I used really hard and ended up in legal problems and then in rehab. And it was just that simple. I mean, sure, jail is just a little manifestation of how bad things can get, but it paints you a picture of guy. If you don't fix this, this is going to get really
ugly.
This is going to get you're going to end your life.
Wow. Yeah.
This is going to take you all the way down, And is this your dharma? Is this how you want to live? Is this what you think you were brought on this planet to do? And all of those things came flashing through my mind in jail cells and in rehab, and those voices can be very, very quiet at first, but they can plant a seed within you that is so deep and so full of reverence that they can fill you up and just make you change your ways. It's just not worth it.
Addiction is such a dark place. We've had a lot of different doctors and specialists on. I think you've talked to Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
Gabor has like this very interesting perspective on addiction, on how, it's rooted in childhood trauma, rooted in this suffering that we encounter as children. And we are trying to just numb this suffering away. We're just trying to make the pain sort of stop. Addiction should be regarded as this sort of health disorder, not a criminal disorder. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree 100%. I think all the work that he's doing and so many others are doing is wonderful. But I'll also caveat that too, because there is something that Gabor has said in some of those talks that he gives that I do counter against. In that, yes, all of those things are true. Childhood trauma and lack of connection and us just trying to, run away and heal the pain, and all of that is true. But there is also a physiological, chemical element to it as well, and that it doesn't matter how spiritual I am or how many Hanuman Chalisas I chant. If I put opiates in my body, the opiates react differently to me. And now the data is now showing that because of the Oxycontin epidemic that swept America, we now have a lot more data about opiate addiction than we ever have before. But that anywhere like as high, some numbers are saying as high as 20% of the American population is predisposed to opiate addiction. And that's a really high number. I mean, Jesus, that's 1 in 5 people. That means that, you put that chemical inside of you, and when you stop taking it, after the surgery is over, your recovery is over, your body screams more. And sometimes that has to do with childhood trauma. Sometimes it has nothing to do with childhood trauma. So I just think that sometimes a lot of those topics that are being floated around in the alternative addiction healing communities, I love them and I think they're powerful, but I think sometimes they can be too generalizing. Some people just have the gene. Not everyone needs to let the gene take them all the way to jail. I'm not saying that. And then when you get that far deep, yes, that probably has a lot to do. I could speak for myself, that went far beyond just me being strung out and needing more, that went into some serious pain and self-loathing to let it go that far. Healthy, evolved people who are in touch, with their hearts and their souls can probably seek help much quicker.
How do you think, in your own personal perspective and experience, we can create a more balanced understanding of the process of addiction and kind of coming out through the other side?
It's like you said it before. It's just, I think our entire culture needs to shift its perspective on how it views addiction. Let's just start there. It's not a criminal justice thing. This isn't something that should be persecuted. And this should be looked at through the lens of compassion and through the lens of, sickness, but also through the lens of suffering. It's no wonder that the first noble truth in the Buddhist path has to do with suffering, because, we are so fraught with suffering. It seems to come so easily for human beings, And addiction is really just a condition of that. It's just kind of a subset of that, of a way to sort of exacerbate suffering and find a temporary relief for it. It's kind of hard to say, but at first, drugs, I'm talking hard drugs and addiction, they do ease the suffering. It's true. It works temporarily. But, obviously that doesn't last and that's not sustainable. So I think it's just about kind of changing our entire dynamic language, perception, and culture around it.
What's up, guys? You have been listening to Zach Leary on The Human Experience. To hear the rest of this episode, get to thehumanxp.com/members. That will give you access to the members content area, where we have a whole range of content that you can listen to. You help support the show, help us keep this going. Thank you so much for listening.